The beta analytic source explains it's used for dating materials that were once living.
Things like bone, wood, charcoal, shells, even linen or parchment.
That's right. Anything that was once alive and took in carbon from the environment, specifically the radioactive isotope carbon-14.
But not things like metal or stone unless they have some organic bits trapped inside. That's a key limitation.
Correct. The method relies on the decay of that carbon-14 after the organism dies. And they really stress the importance of pretreatment.
Yeah, cleaning the samples meticulously to remove any contamination before analysis. Makes sense you need to date the original thing, not some later dirt.
Whether using the older radiometric method or the newer AMS accelerator mass spectrometry, the cleaning is vital.
And AMS is just a more sensitive version. Allows for smaller samples.
Yes, and potentially more precise dates, especially for older samples. It counts the C14 atoms directly.
Got it. So these dating methods are crucial tools for building the timelines for fossils and artifacts, helping reconstruct life's history. Okay, so we have the mechanism selection, plasticity, and the dating tools. But as the sources you sent show, not everyone is convinced by the standard evolutionary picture. There's skepticism.
Yes, definitely. The Evolution News article mentions over 1,000 doctoral scientists who signed that dissentfromdarwin.org statement.
Right, expressing skepticism that random mutation and natural selection are sufficient to explain life's complexity. They're calling for more critical examination.
And it's important to note, as you said, this doesn't necessarily mean rejecting all evolutionary concepts, but questioning the completeness of the Darwinian mechanism.
Exactly. Then we have sources arguing against evolution from what's described as a naturalistic viewpoint, like the Truth Story article.
That piece frames evolution as, essentially, things made themselves, life from non-life, complexity from simplicity, all without guidance.
And it brings up irreducible complexity as a major hurdle. What exactly is that argument?
They use the example of blood clotting. The idea is that the system requires many parts working together. Take one away, and it fails completely.
So they argue it couldn't have evolved step by step because the intermediate stages wouldn't have worked and wouldn't have been favored by selection.
That's the core of the irreducible complexity argument, yes. The Discovery Institute raises similar points, along with others.
Like questioning the primordial soup, the conditions on early Earth?
Yes, and questioning how the genetic code itself could arise through unguided chemical processes. They also frequently point to the bacterial flagellum.
The little motor thing on bacteria?
Right. They describe it as like a machine rotor, stator, drive shaft, and argue its components have no function on their own, so it couldn't be built gradually by selection.
Okay. What other points did they raise? It seemed like a long list.
They point to the fossil record, arguing species appear suddenly rather than gradually transitioning. They mention conflicts in building the tree of life using molecular data.
Conflicts, like different genes suggesting different evolutionary relationships.
Exactly, what they term phylogenetic conflicts. They also see convergent evolution, unrelated species developing similar traits as challenging common ancestry.
Anything else jump out?
They mention issues with vertebrate embryo development not matching predictions, problems explaining species distribution geographically, the rafting hypothesis for monkeys, for instance.
Rafting monkeys?
Yeah, the idea that monkeys cross the Atlantic from Africa to South America on natural rafts. They also point to functions being found for junk DNA and human abilities like abstract thought or art that don't seem to have obvious survival advantages.
That's a lot of different angles. And then there's the Institute for Creation Research perspective.
They take the fact that all life uses the same basic genetic code, DNA, and the similarity between, say, human and chimp DNA.
Which evolutionary biologists see as evidence for common ancestry.
And they interpret it as evidence for a common designer using a similar plan for different creations.
Okay. So vastly different interpretations of the same data points. Which leads us back to that Reddit discussion. Why does creationism persist so strongly when the scientific consensus on evolution is so broad?
It's a really complex question, and the Yuxiai Lu offer some useful context. First, the definition of theory.
Ah, right. The science definition versus the everyday guess definition.
Exactly. In science, a theory, like evolution, is a robust, well-supported explanation built on tons of evidence, facts, laws, tested hypotheses. It's not just a hunch.
So calling evolution a theory is actually high praise in scientific terms. It's both a theory explaining how life changes and a fact that life has changed.
Precisely. The article also talks about scientific evidence often being indirect. We see particle tracks, not the particles themselves. Lack of direct observation doesn't kill a scientific conclusion if the indirect evidence is strong and consistent.
like with fossils or genetic trails for evolution.
Right. And it distinguishes laws, like Hardy-Weinberg in evolution, describing what happens to gene frequencies, from theories explaining why.
The Yara source also emphasized that science deals with the natural world, right? Supernatural explanations are just outside its toolbox.
Correct. Science can't prove or disprove the supernatural. The burden of proof lies with those making supernatural claims. It also notes that while many scientists might be non-religious, plenty are religious and fully accept evolution. It separates theism, belief in God, from creationism, specific beliefs about divine creation.
So you don't have to choose between faith and science necessarily.
For many people, no. The Reddit thread itself brought up other factors for creationism's persistence, like lack of education, strong community beliefs.
Indoctrination, maybe?
Yeah.
Emotional comfort?
All mentioned. One user pointed out that questioning a literal Genesis interpretation can feel threatening to someone's entire belief system.
That makes sense. And the thread noted creationism seems particularly strong among U.S. evangelicals and less common among those with deep science backgrounds.
Yeah, and there was concern raised about organizations funding what was described as junk science to specifically prop up creationist ideas.
So it's not just about the science itself, but also culture, community, psychology, education. It's tangled.
Deeply tangled.
Yeah.
It highlights that this isn't purely an intellectual debate for many people.
Okay. One more distinct area from the sources, biogenesis, the origin of life itself.
Right, and the source, why is biogenesis such a tough nut to crack? Stresses this is different from evolution. Evolution acts on life that's already here.
And biogenesis is about how that life got started from non-living stuff in the first place.
Exactly. And the article lays out why it's such a huge scientific puzzle. You need information-rich molecules to assemble spontaneously.
Like DNA or RNA.
Right. Complex biochemical pathways need to form. We don't see life just popping up from non-life now. And there are tricky chemical problems like getting all the molecules to have the same handedness, homogeneity.
It sounds incredibly difficult. Did the source offer any potential solutions?
It mentioned the hydrothermal vent theory deep-sea vents, providing energy and chemicals in protected spots. It's a leading hypothesis.
But still very much an unsolved problem.
Oh, definitely. A major frontier in science, separate from the mechanisms of evolution once life existed.
Okay. And just to wrap up, there was that snippet about climate adaptation.
Yes, from the International Journal of Innovative Science and Research Technology, just stressing the real-world need to integrate adaptation planning into development, especially for vulnerable communities.
It connects back, doesn't it? Understanding how life, including us, responds and adapts to environmental change is critical right now.
Absolutely. Whether it's genetic change over generations or faster plastic responses, understanding adaptation is key to tackling climate change, conservation, and building resilient societies.
So bringing this all together, it's clear evolution and adaptation are central, complex scientific concepts backed by a mountain of evidence.
Huge amount, yeah.
Phenotypic plasticity adds this really dynamic layer of rapid response, interacting with genetic evolution in ways we're still figuring out.
It's a very active area of research.
Radiocarbon dating gives us that crucial timeline. But despite the scientific consensus, the skepticism and alternative views, like creationism, persist.
And that persistence stems from a whole mix of factors. Different views on science, faith, culture, education.
Right. It's not just about data. And abiogenesis, the origin of life, that's its own massive scientific quest.
Completely distinct set of challenges.
Okay. So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something for you, our listener, to think about. We're seeing incredibly rapid environmental change happening right now.
Unprecedented in human history, in many ways.
Yeah. So considering everything we've talked about, the slower pace of genetic evolution, the faster responses of phenotypic plasticity, their complex interplay, what do you think are the most pressing questions scientists need to tackle about the future of life, including our own, on this changing planet?
It really brings the relevance of all this research into sharp focus, doesn't it? Thinking about how life will cope, or not cope, in the decades and centuries ahead.
Yeah.
Lots to ponder there.